So, I think the philosophy that we're going to take in this debate today is that more money actually does lead to more problems. What you get on their side of the house is you actually get a government that doesn't have the capacity to provide for its citizens, to provide for defense, to make sure that everyone is safe, to ensure that accurate trade can go on between the colonies and between England and the rest of Europe. What you get on their side of the house is a government that can't provide for anyone, a government that has no capacity or no central authority to make sure that any of this will is enacted. And that is what happens even if they're able to win this war. So what we see on our side of the house is we're going to get a Puerto Rico situation, but it's way better. What we say on our side of the house is that we're going to make sure that you don't necessarily have a vote per se, but what you get is you get the ability to make sure that, number one, you get the least amount of taxes of anyone living in the world currently. American colonists do not have to pay basically anything for their illustrious chai and cookies. It's actually better for America at this time, given that we're not going to win a war against the greatest military ever devised and the most divine king that we have ever seen, but with our little skiffs and handguns that we see on our side of the house that colonists have. So what does Thomas Jefferson tell us? He's like, tyranny's bad, y'all. So what we say on our side of the house is that this tyranny is what's keeping us all from speaking French right now. It's what's keeping us actually being subjects of the French king, which is actually way worse, because if you know, the French actually take the time to chop off people's heads and actually don't even bother promoting the infrastructure and promoting the things that the English have done for us. If you've ever been up to 100 miles north to Quebec, I think you would recognize that the Indians just fuck them up and no one has any protection. Sure, Dad.
You talk about the help the British have given us in the war against the French and the Indians. This is the exact war that they made us pay for with their crippling taxes on tea and all paper. What do you think?
We say on our side of the house is these crippling taxes by my not very good father. Taxes are much less than the average citizen pays in England. We also say on our side of the house is the average citizen in England doesn't have the voice that idealistic Thomas Jefferson and Patrick gender-neutral Henry. We say on our side of the house is it's still a tyranny in England no matter what. So what we say on our side of the house, you have a choice still between two tyrannies. Because actually, the average citizen in Great Britain doesn't have the voice that that government would want you to believe. They don't have the ability to elect members of parliament. They live in districts where 3 members have the vote and where people are not able to actually exercise their democratic right. There's nothing that we see in terms of elections that function properly in Great Britain. What we see on our side of the house, you have a choice to live between two tyrannies. One, where you're taxed a hell of a lot and British people are shooting you in the head. Or another, where you're not being taxed at all and no one's shooting you in the head. That's the side of the house that we would rather live on. So then Thomas Jefferson makes a bunch of New Jersey jokes. So what I say to that is I think it's the government of New Jersey. We actually can provide a lot of things for the colonies. So first, we say we have Newark, which is the greatest city in the world. We also have cake laws. So we think on our side of the house, when you have better cakes, when you have the ability to engage people with baked goods, you're able to enact a democratic society that can actually be much better in the long term when you get these creative cakes. I'll take you in a second. We also see on our side of the house is that there is no formal capacity between the colonies existing as a unified body. I think it's very important for societies to actually exist, such as the UK. The counties are actually able to work together and derive their power from a central authority in London. There is no central authority in the United States. Is it Philadelphia? Is it Charleston? I don't know. Who's going to make those decisions? I obviously would want it to be Trenton, but probably South Carolina would think differently. We don't think that these differences, at the time where you're going to have the greatest military running around your country, is actually going to lead to a society that is going to be able to provide for its own citizens. Sure.
What is a cake boss? Is it as bad as Newark is?
First off, we say that Cory Booker is actually an amazing movie. We say that these cakes with chocolate and peanut butter and fondant frosting is actually what you get on our side of the house, because there's no military and no military engagement that would keep the great bakers of New Jersey from making these cakes. When you get on our side of the house, there's no freedom to make whatever cakes you want, because no one's shooting you in the head. So I think that the other thing that they haven't really addressed is why this is actually a terrible idea. So what's going on right now? Because mind you, we're talking about the Continental Congress here. So Boston has actually been occupied by British troops for a numerous amount of months. So this is actually a huge problem, and it shows what life is going to be like during a British occupation when they're actually angry at you for choosing to fight with them. We don't think that having to shut off your candles at 8 p.m. and not being able to walk around the Boston Common with my little lady friend is actually going to be something that's beneficial. What we see on our side of the house is we would rather sacrifice our right to vote in a parliament that isn't going to represent us anyway than be able to walk around with all your little pretty girls at night on the Boston Common. We see on our side, their side of the house, what you actually get when you're celebrating Boston's World Series win and riding in the streets like UNH was last night is you get British troops shooting you in the head. We don't think that it's actually going to be beneficial for whenever you have a grievance, wherever you decide to do anything in the street that the British government doesn't like you to do, they shoot you in the head because they can do that because of the most powerful and well-organized military on the face of the earth. We don't think that we're going to be able to fight that necessarily, and we don't even think there's any justification for fighting it, especially given that these taxes that they've harped on for their entire first speech are not even bad to begin with. We're proud to oppose.
Here, here.
Now, people talk a lot about things that we should be thankful to me, Ben Franklin, for creating. Bifocals, the Franklin stove, the lightning rod. Having not listened to that nonsense for a few minutes, though, I think we can see why not included on this list is my dear, dear bastard son. Now, yes, much like daylight saving time, the things I invent by accident are often the worst. That at the age of 20, a man is governed by will, at 30 by wit, and at 40 by judgment. Now, based on his idea of business formal attire, I think it's visible my son is falling a little behind schedule. Going to Boston with your little lady friends? Anyway, what a coincidence that his ideas are just as foolish and poorly thought out. So first, before I go on to my own arguments, I'm going to talk a little about what my son told you. So, first, he talks about how much fewer taxes we have, how much better we off than those people in England we are. Now, it's true that we may have quantitatively fewer taxes, but we think these taxes are so unjustly applied as to cripple us economically, and are, what's worst of all, are done without any representation or without any consent from the people. A just government does not pass any law or any policy without giving its people a chance to react against that policy, and that is what we're deprived in being a colony. He talks about how we don't have the military might to win this war, and at the same time he talks about this horrible threat of the French. That is exactly the threat that can be our ally if we declare against our mutual enemy, Great Britain. I've already been to France on numerous diplomatic missions from the state of Pennsylvania, and I can be quite certain that they will be willing to give us naval support in the event of a war. Now, then he talks about how Britain is this horrible tyranny. He says, in Britain, you don't have a free press, you don't have your rights to property, you can't even vote properly. Now, he's right. Britain's terrible. I couldn't agree more. But if we declare our independence from this horrible tyrannical king, then we can build a better system. We can build the beginning of a new age of democracy and enlightenment. So, with that, I'd like to talk about the two main reasons why we should declare independence from the crown. First is politics, and second is what my bastard seems to understand so poorly, economics. Politics, to start. We believe that all people have a God-given inherent right to self-governance. Now, what does this mean? Of course, a state in which every man governs himself is no state at all, save for a state of anarchy. But what we say is that a state... Oh, you cut off my... Go on.
It's clear that you would advocate for a system where people are self-governing, given the fact that you left me all alone by myself when I was a child.
Considering how you turned out, that is a pretty strong argument for yourself. But let's look at the bigger picture. Now, the reason that we have the right to self-governance is because a government needs to be generated. A government draws its power from the people. And if it has people off in a colony who it gives unequal representation to, or in our case, no representation at all, it has no right to call itself the government of those people. So in declaring our independence, all we're really doing is asserting what, by all rights, should already be ours. My friend, Mr. Jefferson, has talked to you greatly about how they've violated our natural rights to property, disrespecting our homes with their quartering acts, our rights to self-determination, making laws on our behalf in which we have no say, and our rights to speech and expression, which even my son agrees are hugely infringed by the British government. Now let me tell you, a just government is one which takes pains to see that the needs of its people are fulfilled. An unjust one is one which calls on its people to take pains means to fulfill its own needs, it is illogical and unjust for thousands of people to toil for the benefit of one person, even if that one person happens to wear a fancy red cape and call himself king. Now, about economics, which my son tells you that we will have no way of supporting ourselves as an independent nation. On the contrary, as a colony, we create all of these raw materials. We create huge yields of crops in the south, and yet in the north, where we could have industry, where we could be using these materials for our own benefit, we are told that we cannot. We have to send those resources to England to be made into usable goods so that they can be sold back to us. A thief who sells the fruit of his crimes back to their owner at a cost is still a thief. And I think that is all that the British are to us. New York, Massachusetts, even New Jersey, all of these colonies have the human capital, have the knowledge needed to produce a thriving industrial center. Even their cake bakers are skilled, or so I'm told. But we're told by the Crown that we have to ship off our raw goods to England, and to England alone. And there, my friends, is the kicker, because trade with England, the problem is coercive. Now, I suppose I neglected your education a bit. Let me give you a lesson about economics. Suppose I have a cobbler down the street. If that cobbler wants me to visit his shop, if he wants to keep my business, he has to have the best price or the best shoes, and then I will. But if he takes out his musket and points it at my head and forbids me to visit any other cobbler, well now, he has no reason to have my interests in mind. He can charge whatever he likes, and he can make as terrible a product as he likes. If this man were to do that, I would have no reason not to renounce my relations to him and immediately be opened up to the world of trade that could be offered to me. What is it now?
The problem is if you do that, you get shot in the head.
In theory, yes. But the cobbler next door, in this case, France, I think, has a musket as well. So we should be all right. Now, I mean, hopefully. But I'm sure my associate will tell you that even if it would lead to death, that would be preferable to a lack of liberty. So, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, under the current system, we can only trade with England. Thus, England can set whatever price they like, trade us whatever they want. If we declare independence, we can trade not only with the French, but with the growing Spanish colonies, with the Spanish mainland, with anywhere we like. And this is what's going to be good for our economy. Not this just kowtowing to this ideal of British colonialism, which puts Britain before us, and us with no representation and no fair government. That is why I beg you to agree and to vote that we unite under a single nation, under our glorious symbol, the turkey. Thank you.